Hello, Year 10. So if you're listening to this video, I will be here to talk you through lesson 3 of this week's work, okay? This work is going to look a little bit different from the third lesson that you've been doing previously, but there's a lot of similarity as well, okay? So previously, as you will know, you've been given 5 quotes that we have put in bold for you, and then you've had to answer a series of questions on that quote. This time, to make it just that little bit more difficult, we are giving you an extract and you are going to have to pick your own quotes, but then you'll be answering actually the same questions again on those quotes. So the only difference is this time you need to pick them, okay? The where you're going to be picking them from is here. So you're going to be getting an extract and an exam question, and you have to pick the 3 quotes that you would use to answer that exam question. All right, so let's have a look at this. So this is your classic Literature Paper 1 exam question setup, where it says, read the following extract from Act 5, Scene 3 of Romeo and Juliet. At this point in the play, Capulet and Montague have just learned that their children are dead. Okay, so we're looking at right at the end of the play here. And then I'll just read through the extract for you. So, O brother Montague, give me thy hand. This is my daughter's jointure, for no more can I demand. But I can give thee more, for I will raise her statue in pure gold, that while Verona by that name is known, there shall no figure at such rate be set as that of true and faithful Juliet. As rich shall Romeo's by his ladies lie, poor sacrifices of our enmity. A glooming peace this morning with it brings, the sun for sorrow will not show his head. Go hence, to have more talk of these sad things. Some shall be pardoned and some punished, for never was a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo. So that's actually the very end of the play, as you can see that then they exit. And then we have our exam question. So, starting with this extract, explore how Shakespeare presents fate in Romeo and Juliet. Write about how Shakespeare presents fate in the extract and how Shakespeare presents fate in the play as a whole. So, as I said, you just need to pick 3 quotes that you would use to answer that question. So, in other words, 3 quotes that would allow you to talk about fate in the play. And then when you've got those 3 quotes, you're actually doing the exact same questions as you ever were. Okay, so these 6 questions should be very familiar to you. It's the same ones that you've been using to look at quotes in detail the past couple of weeks. So I'm just going to talk through a little bit about what you might want to consider when you're choosing your quotes from this extract. So at first glance, talking about fate in this extract might seem quite difficult because you might be thinking, well, they're not talking about fate. They are not referencing fate explicitly. And that is true, but actually it's a lot easier than it seems because the whole point of this extract is that it's about Romeo and Juliet being dead, right? And as we know, all through the play, it has been hinted and foreshadowed and suggested that their relationship was going to lead to their death. All right, so you can use basically any line from this to talk about fate, because the point you'll be making is that they have now met their fate. So all of the hints and the foreshadowing that was dropped previous to this point, this is like the payoff of all of that, okay? This is, well, the other characters have now realised the horrible fate that their relationship has led them to. So don't sort of get tangled up thinking, oh, but they're not really talking about fate, because this is Romeo and Juliet meeting their fate. Okay, so in terms of thinking about the structure of the play, if I were you, I would be linking previous quotes that you've already looked at. Look on your table that you should have been filling in for what you've got under that fate column and kind of linking those quotes to this moment, because this is obviously the payoff of all of that foreshadowing from earlier on in the play. So in terms of picking a specific quote, so I might go for something like, some shall be pardoned and some punished, from the prince. All right, so the idea that fate has led to the death of Romeo and Juliet and also to a sort of punishment for both families, both the Montagues and the Capulets, as a punishment for their feud. Okay, so some shall be pardoned and some punished. So let's think about that quote in relation to these questions. So what does that quote tell us about the character who is speaking? So it's all about the prince being sort of an authority figure, isn't it? So we know from the start of the play that he was attempting to exert authority over the Montagues and the Capulets. He said, didn't he, that your lives will pay the forfeit of the price if they broke the peace again. So in other words, if they kept fighting, then they would be executed. So that's a kind of foreshadowing in itself isn't it? Because that kind of has come to play, not exactly as the prince meant it at the beginning of the play, but that's sort of what has ended up happening. How does this link to any other characters? Well, obviously it's a comment on Romeo and Juliet. I think you could also link it to the idea of Friar Lawrence, another character who can kind of foresee that the feud between the two families is going to end in death, that's going to end in disaster, and he also tries to stop it. So there are two characters who do have quite a lot of foreshadowing lines. For example, when the friar says, "These violent delights have violent ends," so you could probably link them together. Does it link to any other parts of the play? Definitely. So as we were saying, it links to Act 1, when the prince is saying, if you break the peace again, your lives will pay the forfeit of the peace. All right, so he comes up there as a figure of authority, and now he's come up again at the end. In terms of placing it on your grid, I would imagine that you might place this under fate. That's a little tip for you. What does it suggest about fate? Well, what is ever suggested about fate in Romeo and Juliet is suggested that it's inescapable, and that Romeo and Juliet, try as they might, could never do anything to escape their death. And then finally, details of the quote, language or structure. So I think for most of these quotes, I would be thinking about a structural comment. So how can you link this to something that was foreshadowed earlier? So again, I would be linking it to the quote from the prince from Act 1. And I do believe that was one of the quotes that you were asked to look at when you were doing Act 1, so you should have it in your table. Okay, so that's the deal. All right, so you're looking at 3 quotes that allow you to say something about fate. You might find that your points come out a little bit similar. I think that's okay, because they are all going to be about this idea of fate, the idea that they die at the end and they can escape that. Just try and approach it from a few different angles, okay? So you could think about linking it to when Mercutio says a plague on both your houses. This is that plague, isn't it, in this moment? The death of the 2 children of the 2 houses is sort of the plague, is the punishment. You could think about linking it to the fact that the reason that Friar Lawrence agrees to marry Romeo and Juliet to each other is to end the feud between the Capets and the Montagues. He hopes that in doing that, they will reconcile with each other. And then really interestingly, that's actually exactly what happens. Look at this opening line, "O brother Montague, give me thy hand." So again, not quite how we expected it, but actually the marriage of Romeo and Juliet has reconciled the 2 families. It's just done it in this really tragic way, which obviously they didn't see coming. So I think this quote, "O brother Montague, give me thy hand," would also be a really useful one to talk about. That idea that fate is a sort of very kind of unreliable twisting force, so the friar thinks that he can foresee that this will mean that the families forgive each other, but what he doesn't foresee is that it will take the deaths of Romeo and Juliet to get there. All right, so 3 quotes, the 6 questions on those 3 quotes, and then if you are feeling particularly industrious, you could actually just answer the question properly. Okay, I would really, really, really encourage you to have a go at actually just answering the question properly. I'm sure that your essay skills are getting a little bit rusty while we've been at home, so you've got the normal small, medium, big structure there. Why not have a go at writing it up properly, or even just having a go at writing one of the paragraphs up properly? That it will be very worthwhile too. And of course, if you send that to your teachers, they will be more than happy to give you some detailed feedback on it. Okay, as ever, any questions, no excuses, just message your teacher and they will explain anything that you don't understand. They can help you pick out quotations if you need help with that. But actually, it's pretty straightforward. You've answered these questions before, so enjoy, and we look forward to reading your work.